All right, we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, AFWO family. My name is Drea, and I am one of the administrators for Air Force Wingman Outreach. And as always, you can go to our email, airforcewingmanoutreach@gmail.com, to reach out to us. If you have any issues or any questions, any concerns, it can be anonymous, totally anonymous. I promise y'all that. Totally anonymous. We post to the page, we rally around like we always do, and we get her done. Or you can go to the top of the page where it says membership, and you can reach out to one of the moderators or the admin, and we are here to help you. So, Apple Speaks, just letting y'all know this is like a season finale type of episode, right? So I'm gonna go on a little hiatus through this holidays and everything like that. So of course I had to end it on a fantastic note. First thing I want to do is just thank every person that has even watched this, contributed, all that other stuff. I appreciate it. The admin appreciates it. We really hope that y'all got something from it. Thank you to all the guests. I can't name them all. Aretha Boston, Joe, a few other ones. But anywho, I just want to thank y'all for making it what it is. Anyway, without further ado, we have a special guest. Okay, so we got the man, the myth. I like to call him Satch. His name is David Satchel. We're gonna have him on. How you doing?
Hello. My mama calls me Satch, so you gotta call me Satch.
All right now. All right now. So we got Satch on, and he just came out with a book, and it's called Extracting the Leader Within. And so that was one of the reasons I brought him on. But I also know Satch from a personal perspective. Awesome dude. Not just saying that because he's on, but I'm really glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to do this with you, Dre. Uh, I we go way back, and you were a staff sergeant with a lot of energy, and I was so inspired by you, and so I'm glad that we able to spend this time together. So excited.
Right on, right on. And we will have a great time. And also for our AFWO 36.5K membership, you can ask any questions, make any comments. Satch is not scared. So bring it on.
I ain't scared.
Yes. It's all good. So can you give the folks a little background on yourself?
Oh, so background. Well, let's put this in perspective. I am a son. I am a brother. I am a husband. I'm a father. And so those are real important. And so I always want to make sure that we always keep that in the right space, and that I'm a family person. And then I'm an airman. That's what brings me to this space. An airman that had a 30-year career that started out as a disqualified pararescueman that somehow found his way into the dental career field. And then 12 years later, I cross-trained into the command post career field. And then I just went through the group superintendent, command chief route, and finishing up as the advisor to Chief Wright and General Goldfein in my last year and a half, which was a great drum roll to my transition. And so now I've transitioned to out of the service, and now I am a manager in the Amazon fulfillment business, and so I'm working on my own personal stuff and balancing it all. So that's who I am.
Wow. So what was it like 10 AFSCs did you just name?
Yeah, no, 8 weeks as a pararescue trainee, and that was fun. They showed me they showed me those videos of, blowing stuff up, and so I was like, yeah, and so I made it all the way to when it was time to go, do some halo jumping, and then they told me I had glaucoma, which was an incorrect diagnosis.
Oh,
And
boy.
it just took too long to get me back in with the team. And so they referred back to this sheet that I filled out, and it was a dental technician. And there I go, off to Shepherd Air Force Base.
Shout out to dental. Then command post. Man, I'll tell you, I have so much respect for command posts, especially after being the spirit for wing staff.
Yeah, yeah.
So I did not realize how technical and intelligent that level has to do.
Yeah. Super
So,
smart folks that are there at the ready to do and make decisions for the boss. And so that's really amazing to see airmen, fill that gap when the boss is out. And so it's really cool. Mm.
oh yeah, I mean, trust me, my ignorance was like giant voice. You know what I mean? Or weather update, but
Yeah.
definitely a bigger perspective that I
Yeah.
like. So
Mhm.
let's talk about the things you're doing after your transition. So you have your 1579 blog.
Mhm.
So what was the inspiration for that?
Okay, so 1579 kind of started before I retired. But before then, I was a superintendent, matter of fact, with you, and I was at Hawaii, and all my people were all over the Pacific. And the only way to provide some leadership development was to, throw some stuff out there on email. And so I did best by just kind of using personal stories and sometimes self-deprecating stories that brought the story home for them. And they were eager to hear those every month. And so I was like, wow, we got something here. That was all via email. And then as I started getting into the group superintendent and command chief business, that started to blossom even more. And there was one day I was running down the street and a person yelled, "Is like, tell me about this individual that was in one of the stories," and I was like, wow, it's catching on. And so I said, maybe we have something here. And in this big social environment, that maybe the message can go even wider. And so now that I started to understand technology a little bit more, I built a website called 1579. Fairly obvious what that means, but um, and so I just wanted to connect to the people, give stories on leadership development, and then it transitioned to what I'm doing, regularly, even outside of the military. Not specifically geared to airmen or any military at all. Leadership is leadership, and so now that has jumped up quite a bit. I have probably about 3,000 email subscribers, and maybe 76 or 70,000 hits on there. So it's really fantastic how that's moving along.
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely we know how email and subscribing to things can be, right?
Right.
So after a while, you're like, all right, it's just going straight to my spam.
Right. Right.
I'm not reading that,
Right.
but the content I think is pretty interesting
Hmm.
because what I find is that it's bringing different perspectives on situations that
Yeah.
you thought you saw the whole story,
Yeah.
but you seem to bring a different, I don't know, I don't know how to describe it, but it's subjective, I guess.
Yeah. That's it. The idea is to talk about subjects that don't get talked about with leadership, and so I talk about them, and I talk about them in a way that hopefully that you be able to reflect and go, is this describe me? Do I make decisions like this, or is this how I think or act? And in the end, it takes some while to make sure I word it perfectly for that, but I want you to think about it when you close. You go, man, that's me, or that's not me, but I know who that person is, and I can learn from that.
True
Mhm.
story.
Mhm.
So speaking of learning, and this will probably be a loaded question, but what is some of the most important lessons you've learned in your career? Like if you had to name like top two, right?
Wow. Wow. I mean, there's so many lessons to be learned, but I would say the one lesson that I learned that is probably I learned really late was that it was okay to be me. Um, Wearing the uniform, we all kind of they kind of tell you here's the path to your success, and you got to do this and this, and you line them up and you got to check each one of those
Mhm.
off
Check the box.
somewhat.
Yeah.
And I wasn't that type of person, and although I knew what I was responsible for, but my personality didn't fit the aggressive uh, peers or other people to the left and right of me. I wasn't that way. And I started to say, well, if I'm going to compete, then I need to be like these others. And I started coming off quite fraudulent because it was just not me. And they were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, especially my wife, she's like, this is not you.
Mhm.
And I go, you're right. And it took that last statement that she made to me that I decided that, you know what, I'm just going to be David Satchel. And no matter how fast people are running around me, I'm just going to be me. So that also means that I may be running a slower race than others, because I'm maybe not out there like others. And maybe I didn't, I wasn't able to, obtain a particular role that maybe could be in front of me, but I was okay with just being David Satchel. And so that was a lesson that took a long time for me to really, really get. And it took my wife looking at me and like, okay, this is not you, and stop doing that, right? So
Mm, mm,
that
mm.
was one. And then I guess the other one is, I had my line number taken as a tech sergeant select, because I was just being a bonehead. And of course, I blamed my commander for it, but I learned so much from that. But I would say the lesson, because that's what you're asking me,
Mhm.
is that there's a bruising period. I mean, so you get hit for whatever transgression, and then there's a period of time where you're gonna see bruise, and nothing's gonna happen during that time. You're not gonna get any good things coming your way. You just need to get through the bruising period and be patient about it. But I also had a supervisor that was willing to put his arm around me and help me through the bruising period and just remind me, hey, this is going to take time. Back during my time, that's a 10-year period before those big things fall off your record. Now it's 5-year period.
Right.
And so sometimes if you're not patient enough, you may want to eject from this business
Mm.
because you don't think that you're getting a fair deal. But the bruising is going to happen, and there's so many lessons to learn from it, if you just allow yourself to. So I
Mm.
did, and it took a while. It took a little bit longer for me to make senior, a little bit
Right.
longer to make chief, but look, it all worked out. So
Sure.
so just I think those are the lessons that people are going to have to understand.
Ooh, those are really good. Like
Mhm.
that bruising thing, I felt that because instant gratification, right?
Mhm.
Like and I think those two lessons you did tie together
Mhm.
because one is freeing to be you, but being that other person is ultimately supposed to get you that success, right?
Right.
So you're not going to get any crap, or
Right.
you're going to, if you do get in any trouble, well, if I do this, then that should get me out of it.
Yeah.
Like any type of action, I should be able to get out of this situation versus being patient and waiting
Mhm.
for the process to work. So
Yeah.
I think it's hard for people to be themselves because sometimes we get told there's a recipe for success. Like I did
Yeah.
it, you can do it.
That's right.
And I think what we forget is that was that person's path.
Yeah.
Like they know how they got there, but they
Yeah.
can't tell you how you could get there.
So, so I am a massive introvert, and being among really gregarious personalities like the Todd Simmons, the Khalid Wrights, even the Joanne Basses. There is some really powerhouse leaders out there that I grew up with, and I was not like them. And I always would question myself, you know, what's wrong with me, that I can't create a an influential circle like these folks. But then I began to learn that I did, but this was like a one-on-one, where, of course, Chief Wright had this big boom, 3,000 people that all love him, right? And
Yeah.
so um, it was confirmed when I retired, and I was beginning right before COVID to set up my retirement ceremony. And here we are, 300 people wanting to fly in to my retirement. I'm like, what is going on? I mean, this is how late it took me to understand my influence and that it was okay to do it my way.
Mhm.
That people were actually coming here to see. We had to change our venue 3 times because I was like, no way. I told them, I
More
was like,
people.
yeah, like 75 people maybe, you know. And so and so it just kept changing and changing. And so I said, wow, well, that made a huge impact on me as I transitioned out of the service.
Isn't that wild? You're just like thinking, man, I'm just in my own little bubble. I'm
Hmm.
not bothering nobody. Like I
Right.
have real conversations with
Hmm.
people, no big deal.
Right.
And then 30 years later,
Yeah.
that all comes to fruition.
No clue at all. Just living in oblivion, you know. But it's cool. I'm really happy about it. And I'm glad that people still kind of, check in on me. And so that's really cool. Really cool.
Well, and also remember, like, just like there are the K rights or the extroverted folks, there are
Mhm.
very much the sectors
Mhm.
that are like, look, I'm a leader, but I'm kind of a silent leader.
Mhm.
Like I can lead over here the sidelines, but you put me in front of people.
Yeah.
Like I'm good on that.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is the extroverted people versus and the introverted people are just like, why can't you be more like us? Well,
Yeah.
introvert is like, why can't you just calm
Right.
down? Like,
I
so,
think the Air Force though creates you. They want all of us to be extroverted to some extent, and so I think there's still some room for us to understand, introverted leader and their capability. And it took a while for me to understand me. And so I would say to those folks that are navigating up the ladder, just continue to be yourself. You're going to have some positive influence, and people are going to grab hold of you and use you as an example just as much as they would an
mm,
extroverted leader.
agreed. And also, it can be situational. I know for me, I wasn't always the excited and energized person.
Hmm.
I was like the quiet, like don't put me
Right.
from BMT to wherever. And then when I was NCO, it was like you gotta talk.
Right.
And
Right. Right.
I'm like, but I don't want to talk. And they're like,
Right.
yeah, unless you will, in NCOA you will.
Yeah.
Well, it's a growth process, right? Agreed.
True.
So this page is about mental health as well.
Hmm.
So can you kind of give the folks like your perspective about it? Um, have you had any experiences, positive or negative, in your life?
So I'm glad we're talking about this, and it's something that I think about often because there's people around you that are struggling all the time, and we just don't know it. But so I have up front, I have no experience in the institution of mental health, but I think that we all have experience in mental health. And so if we use the word health, and forgive me for getting academic, but if we use the word health, then that means that there's a spectrum, good to bad, vulnerable to controlled, resilient to you name it, whatever that spectrum is. So we're all trafficking within this spectrum of health. And so I think we all kind of have an experience in mental health. And I know that I have. And, sometimes we'll find ourselves trafficking, on the low end of the spectrum. And that could be hour to hour, day to day, week to week. And so, yeah, so I have experience in mental health.
Mhm.
And what do I do about it? And that is most of the time I have 5 of the best people that I keep in my circle
Mhm.
that I can always count on. And so I'm glad that I have that whenever I'm just not doing well, I just know who to call. So sometimes you got your boys that I was just going to just tell you, hey man, suck it up, put some, you know, have a drink or whatever.
Yeah.
But then there's some people that you can count on that's going to be real with you. someone that'll tell you you have a booger in your nose.
Yeah.
Those kind of people,
Yeah.
that's the people that I know I keep in my circle, and they help me with my own mental health as I traffic within that spectrum. And so, um, then there's people that, as a command chief, as an additional duty shirt, that I've had to work with to help them, get back in the right traffic pattern so that they can be more centered. The extremes of mental health are so dangerous, both, I would call it utopia,
Yeah.
and, the other extreme where, to the point where you really want to do something dangerous.
Right.
And so, I mean, both of those extremes can be dangerous.
Yeah.
And so to help someone center themselves is really difficult, and sometimes it's beyond me. And I'm happy to take someone's hand and take them to the mental health clinic where a professional can really identify where they are within that spectrum.
Oh yeah. And I mean, by all means, none of us are experts on this, but we do have that human factor, right?
Mhm.
And so it's more of um, having a sense of self awareness of
Mhm.
yourself, of the
Yeah.
people around you. And so I'm 1,000% with the support group, like with having people in your corner,
Yeah.
because it's nothing like, you know what, I got to call such and such so we can talk about this.
Mhm.
Or just going through those not so good times.
Yeah.
So I think you made up a great point that mental health, there's a good and the bad, right? That spectrum, but also addressing it from the point of like, okay, there is. I think I went to a briefing and the speaker was saying instead of saying somebody has a mental health issue, say they're living with condition X.
Mhm.
Like that's not a defining moment for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I find myself thinking about this and saying, what can I do to bring this person to back to center? And can only a professional do that? And for David Satchel, I've always been the type of person that's been like, forget it, Um, and I've had this ability to just put things behind me and walk away.
mhm,
And so I'm glad that that's part of me,
mhm.
because I've had a lot of bad experiences in life, just like anyone else has. But if I didn't, I would hope that someone would say, hey, man, this is beyond me, and that maybe only a professional could get this person back to center.
So even in those higher level positions that you have, or even in management and the responsibility of people, you didn't feel a sense of pressure or, you know, any doubts
Hmm.
in your mind as far as what your capability was based on what your personality is
Yeah.
versus being able to adapt to. I mean, you could easily be. I mean, what's a whole base? What's a whole command? Those number of people. Did you ever think in your mind, like, you know what? I'm not sure if I could do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough, right? And so you got to count on people to be able to to take their small chunks of their community and make sure you can count on them um, to be engaging with their folks so they can identify those people that are just not doing well. You know, for me, um, I've always been very, very perceptive. And so I go see my people as a young leader, and as an older leader, I was always go and I can go, hey man, you look a little redder in the face than you normally do,
Yeah.
and they go, oh, I'm dealing with this. And then there's opportunities there to communicate about the issues that the people are going through, including the things that are going well. You're like,
Yeah.
hey, you're red. Oh yeah, I just had a beach party, and then you
Right.
get to talk about some of the
Mm,
positive things as well.
true.
So it's not always negative.
Yep.
Again, that spectrum of health. And
Yep.
so, you know, I think we have to spend more time, engaging with our folks. And so, but to your point, as a leader, I always got to depend on my lower level leaders to be able to say, hey, it's your responsibility to be very intrusive
Mm, mm,
intrusive and understand, these people on an individual basis. And once you do, then you could be able to pick those things out and maybe catch it before you're right of boom.
So didn't you do a blog on intrusive leadership?
I may have,
Okay.
and a lot of it, but I would say that almost every one of my blogs are about intrusive leadership because it's all about real deal engaging relationships where you get to know people where they are. There's a story about Antoine, and understanding that individual so that I didn't make any assumptions about Antoine, because we all enter this race on different entrance and exit points. And so to be able to understand Antoine, I got to ask questions. I need him to talk back to me. I don't want to assign a label to what I'm seeing in front of me. I would rather them label it themselves. And so that's part of the intrusive leadership that we're talking about.
Ooh, what does it take? What does it take not to assign labels to people?
It's so easy to do it, right? Especially if you don't know a person, you say this means this, and if you get
We are
into my
reading
book,
all the time.
right? We're always doing it. And instead, what if this is something I always say, tell me what your face is saying, right? I always say that all the time because I don't want to label it. Someone maybe, looking angry, someone, maybe it's just they're, just having an intense moment. I wanted them to tell me what it means. And then we can talk from there, right? Maybe it's absolutely nothing and benign, but maybe it is something big. But if I knew my people from the start, then I can tell facial expressions, right? But I never want to jump in and say that facial expression means X. And I'd rather them label it themselves.
Wow. Tell me what your face is saying. I've never asked anybody that in my entire life. Like it is, full disclosure, it's either been an assumption or like preconceived.
Yeah.
To where it's like, oh, okay, based on these actions, X plus Y equals this. Versus what if it's just not that?
Right.
Oh man.
So like Dre, like the X factor of cultural competence is one of my blogs. It's also made it into my book. And the example is about Antoine. And Antoine is a person who has discussions from their parents and their what I call primary influences, who's always told them to, don't get in an ambulance, don't trust these types of people. And if this happens, you stick your chest out, you never cry, those kind of things.
Yeah.
And so because you don't know what their primary influences has ever said to them, you can't assign a label to them because you have no earthly idea. Your same kind of table talk that's happened in your home is probably starkly different. And so you might react to the same type of scenario totally different, and your facial expression may look different as well.
Wow. You just don't know. I'm learning stuff here too, but I promise you. Well, that they hit me right in the feels. Okay, so let's talk about this book.
Okay.
Why now?
So the blog, I guess, is the beginning, and then I started getting messages from my blog followers. It's like, I'm waiting for the book, and I was like, there ain't no way in hell I'm writing a book, right?
Pressure from the fan.
So I would like to say I got talked into it, but I think it's probably the next evolution to the blog. And I think I was making some headway with my readers. And so the blog really gave me an opportunity to build out the stories that I was sharing. All of them true. There's no made up story at all in the book nor a blog. And because I needed it to stay real with people and them to really understand or see themselves in it. And so why now? It's because I would say as I was leaving the service, I was doing my rev run exhale from the Air Force, where I was like, I need to get the rest of this out to you before it's all done, And so I did. And then here I am at home and I'm going, there's much more to say.
Mm.
And so that's where we got to the book. Mhm.
So what? So there's a part two, or there's another book coming?
Please don't ask me about that. I would tell you though,
I'm kidding, peeps.
people ask about that a lot, right? But I guess we'll see. It wasn't as hard as I thought it was,
Mm.
and and once you get the muse, once the muse kicks in, you're just like, I'm spending hours and hours just typing away, and it became a lot more simple than I thought it was. But that was cool.
Well, think about, I mean, probably the hours you spent email, declarations.
Mhm.
You've been writing your whole career.
Mhm.
You know what
Mhm.
I mean? So the
Yep.
blogs transitioned you into this point.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So what audience are you speaking to?
So initially with the blog, of course, I was looking directly at our airmen in the eyeballs, and then as I transitioned, um, and as the blog began to develop, I was starting to pick up an audience that was outside the uniform, and so I started exchanging words. You might see words like shareholder value in there, um, which is synonymous with mission accomplishment. So we took out the military jargon and then entered some more baseline information so that any reader could understand. And so I have another audience now that I'm outside of the Air Force, and so I wanted to make sure that they could understand it as well. You know, the institution cannot contain leadership. It crosses all domains, and so you can't confine it to the Air Force. Leadership is leadership everywhere, from your home to a civilian practice to the military. So it was easy to do.
Well, but you got to know that, like us being in the bubble of the military, we're like, oh man, we always hear about leadership, leadership, leadership. You know, we've
Yeah.
done the John Maxwells and all those
Yeah.
different ones,
Yeah.
right? But it's it's parallel, right?
There
And
is.
so when I was reading the book, and I'm not just saying this because Satch is on, it was like you didn't really feel the military aspect.
Hmm.
Like you were just generally talking to somebody like you and I are talking. We weren't using jargon, we were using acronyms. It was just purely like, hey, this is leadership, black and white, or from your perspective.
Hmm.
And I also noticed that you mentioned emotional intelligence.
Hmm.
And so that to me is a lot of people have a hard time with that. Now, why did you feel like that was something you need to mention in this book?
So the squishy skills of emotional intelligence, right? So
Mm.
I know people I think we're getting there. I think we are. But it's the military or the Air Force is transitioning to a more emotional intelligent leadership construct, and I'm glad, so that we are no longer saying go. We are able to explain. We're able to communicate, but those 5 skills that I talk about in emotional intelligence of self-awareness, self-control, motivation, social skill, and empathy. Using these skills are going to really move the needle. And it's going to the changing face of our force, where the younger folks are really needing these skills in their leaders, is going to dictate that we start to utilize these skills. But I think that the leaders that we have in the Air Force today, they are in tune with emotional intelligence, and I'm glad. So once they start seeing examples of it, then I think we'll see more of it down at the lower ranks. From 1942, you had a very uneducated force, enlisted force. I mean, I would call them dumb, and so they knew how to fix cars, and they were mechanics, and they were able to do some other tasks that they could follow a checklist. But actually thinking big and broadly and connecting dots. It's not something we asked out of them, but now our service is asking for that new layer, and we have the capacity to do it. And so, and you're going to see it in our leaders. I mean, of course, I think Joanne Bass, exudes emotional intelligence. And so I think once you see it in your leader, you'll see it at the lower levels.
Well, I'll tell you from perspective of somebody who has basically seen the transition of both, like started out in the non-emotional intelligent, and then over to the emotional intelligent. We struggle out here. But I do think I'm starting to notice that adapting to and welcoming the questioning of information, the desire to seek more information, not necessarily questioning, just saying, hey, we want to understand why things happen, versus don't ask me why, just do it.
Yeah.
So that's interesting.
There's a chapter in my book called The Curious Question of Why. And it starts back with General von Steuben, which is a European general officer who is also the person who designed our training, who puts us in 4 elements, flight of 40, and so forth. Von Steuben was so wigged out about the American military asking so many questions because the European military just did. And so as he writes in his diary, it was, we don't understand this about the American military where they're asking why, but I found that it's so important that we do answer this question. And so von Steuben directed his officers, soldiers, questions of why. So if we're talking about this era, I mean, hundreds of years ago, we're still debating if we need to be emotionally intelligent or not. I don't understand that, right? But we're well beyond this. This is not a new topic, and the American human is interested in why. And I think if we give that to them at the start, I think we can really move the needle very, very quickly.
Well, I also think that some of it obviously starts, the way we were raised, right?
Yeah.
I know for me personally, I'm not asking my mama why.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
Right. And then you get into the military, and it's a different aspect. You go to BMT, you go to tech school, and then you eventually get to your first assignment. But you have to learn some way, right? Yeah. So you have to learn some way, right? So I think to me it's about perspective. We just need to be more open-minded, right?
Absolutely. And so we're changing, and I'm glad.
So next question is, so being an author, like, does it feel any different? Are you kind of like, ask whatever? You're a humble dude. I know you're like,
no, it is not. It hasn't felt any different, and it's so new, and so maybe it will. But I don't know.
It's still too early to tell.
It totally is.
But when they gave you this print though, when you held that thing in your hand though,
that was exciting. It really was. So, it cost a lot of money, Dre, to get your book published. And so it was hard for me to actually invest money out of from my family for one of my ventures. Right. And so that was a difficult thing for me to do. And so all I'm hoping is that I just get my money back. Right. But and that's doing very well.
Okay.
But
just break even.
And so from there, I got to fulfill my rev, run, exhale, and so that's what I really want. And I don't know, I haven't absorbed the whole author business just yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a different type of weird guy right here. I know.
Okay, I know. Hey, it's not even. It may not even hit you yet because you're just probably so much in the logistics of it, right?
Yeah. For sure, for sure.
And so it'll probably take a lot of people saying, "Hey, that was great." No worries, no worries. So being retired, I know you. What is that? What has that been like? Has the transition been tough?
Okay, so another quirky thing about David Satchel, I never ever found my identity in my uniform or my stripes, and so the transition was super
It's
simple.
seamless.
It was just, and I was so worried about it because so many others have talked about how tough this is. I also wanted the challenge of doing something in the commercial world rather than, taking on a GS job
Right.
because I wanted to challenge myself. But, um, and I noticed that some folks have a tougher time transitioning because their identity is their uniform. And so I can understand why it is. It's because that's the thing that you've done for so many years.
Right.
But I've always talked about being Satch, right? I've
Mhm.
always I wanted my leadership to subordinate relationship to be about a strong relationship. And so I never really wanted to ever leverage my stripes to be a leader. And so my identity was not in my stripes.
Mhm.
And um, sometimes my stripes got me in the door so that I can get a good thing done.
Right.
But that wasn't me. And so the transition was pretty seamless. And then, I applied for one job at Amazon
Thank you.
because they have 14 leadership principles that kind of look and smell like our core values. And so I was like, that's the job I want. And that's the one I got hired into. So it's been good. I'm glad that the transition went smoothly. And then we'll see what the rest of my life looks like.
So you literally just got into bed, you were tired, woke up, got the job, and just
I
life is
did. I
good.
mean, and so when you hear all these stories about I'm sorry for. I mean, there's literally. I mean, I never worried about it for 1 second, and and I didn't take the skill bridge where most people do. There's some skill bridge
Right.
internships, which I do recommend if you're
Sure.
going to Amazon, but um, I went in cold because I was still following Chief Wright and General Goldfein all the way to the end of my time. So I
Right.
just didn't have the time to be able to invest in those,
Right.
in those internships.
Right.
And so, um, and so then I just went in cold, hired cold. I did everything as if it was the first time I had ever applied for a job. In
Right.
fact, it was the third job I ever had ever in my
In
life.
your entire life.
Mhm.
That's that's
I worked at Taco Bell for 3 years before. So,
so. And then with Air Force and then Amazon. What a
mhm.
resume.
I know it's crazy.
Well, that's awesome. You're probably like, I mean, congratulations on the fact that you just were able to just keep the movement. Because I
Yeah.
know there are some people out there that really struggle with that.
But Dre, don't let me go on about this, but I would say if you spent your career, your military career, not locking in your identity into your uniform, you can transition a lot easier because of that. But when it's so locked into your uniform, you are, when someone says, tell me about you, and you say your name is Master Sergeant or,
So,
Chief or something like that, that you're locked in.
yeah.
And so you got to be able to explain who I am outside of this uniform, and that'll help you make that transition a little easier.
No, I want that's a great point. And like I told
Mhm.
you before, that
Mhm.
is what this platform is. Like
Mhm.
it's Stray and Sat. It's not
Mhm.
Chief and whoever. We have our own identities. There's no uniforms or any of that. So that's a great point that you made. So do you have any quotes that inspire you? I know you had a lot of quotes in this book. Tell me, do you have a favorite or one that you find yourself saying all the time?
Yeah, I would say don't look back. You're not going that way. That's the one that I remember. I remind myself every year at the turn of the year, of course, but when things aren't going in the direction that you want.
Mm.
And I always think about that quote. See, that's by I know his name is Henry David. Um, Henry David Thoreau is his name, and but that's it. It's a don't look back. You're not going that way. Stay the course. You got, there's so much opportunity ahead of you. Yeah.
Mm, mm, that's
Mhm.
a good one.
Mhm.
What about? I know we're talking about your book, but do you have any other books or audiobooks or anything that you really like or really enjoy?
Yeah, so I would say Culture Code is probably the read that's helped me the most. By Coyle is the name. Culture Code talks about how, it has a deep psychological and sociological research on how people act in groups and in teams, and how do I identify these people, and how do I set up teams to create a culture where, there's high performance that comes from it. There's an example of how they took MIT students, some kindergartners, uh, and some business majors and so forth, and some military as well. And they said, here's some spaghetti, hard spaghetti, and some mushroom, and not mushrooms, and marshmallows. And I want you to build this, as high as you possibly can with these pieces that we've given
Right.
you. And so, of course, now that I'm setting that up for you, you know that the kindergartners won because they have one of those cultures where they don't care who wins or
Yes.
succeeds. They want to help each other.
Mhm.
And so, by just if there was one book that I would want a leader to read, it's about culture, and that book right there will explain it all out.
Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
Coolio. Inspiration to live.
Inspirational.
Inspiration to live. Like what inspires you to keep living every day?
Oh, so of course my kids, but and my mother. I guess I would say my mother more than anything. So my mother was hired in the early '70s to a job that during that time, that's when affirmative action just began, and her boss said to her, "You're only getting this job is because you're a black female, and I have to hire you." And so she was the mother of two boys, and her 10 brothers and sisters who lived in our home. And and so she had to work for all of them. And so I'm working on top of her shoulders right now. And I'm happy to do it, and she is my inspiration. She keeps me going. She reminds me of where we came from. And then I get to give her all the credit for our success. When I sent my book to her, I wrote in there, my
Yeah.
success is your success, and I don't want you to ever forget that. So that's my inspiration.
All right.
Mhm.
Shout out to Mama. I love that. We got a question in the comments. And this will probably be your opportunity to give your book a quick plug.
Sure.
But they said, where can I get the book if I wanted one? I love reading books, and I would like to purchase one if it's available.
Great. It's a great question. So www.extracttheleader, all one word.com. Um, and then the first thing you'll see is pre-order. Don't select that. Just scroll till you see the book. The book cover is yellow. Click on that, and it'll walk you through it. And then I will get it, um, and then I can sign it if you want it. There's an option for me to sign it if you want it. Otherwise, if you leave it blank, then I'll just send it to you. You'll get it right away. But if you order it by pre-order, you can do that on Barnes and Nobles, my publisher's website on amplify.com, or Amazon. You do it by pre-order, you won't get it there until October. That's when it's fully available to everyone. So I have a stash still here, so you can get it right away if you go through that route.
And an audiobook on deck.
What's that? And an
Audiobook.
audiobook on deck.
Yep.
And that's odd, but I'm working on that right there.
And
So
hear yourself read.
what's that?
I said, what's odd? Hearing yourself read.
Yes, and so I took a chapter and read it, and just I wanted to hear what that sounded like. So I'm beginning. I'll begin that tomorrow morning, full on, and get that done as quick as possible.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Extracttheleader.com, and I put it
That's
on the
it.
screen.
Thank you so much.
And then it's saying, don't click the pre-order. Scroll all the way down and click
Mhm.
you want it because you want it right
That's right. You should get it right now.
now. Right, right.
And hopefully, though, more than importantly, is that you got to hear my heart, put it out there on paper, got to see what leadership looks like from my perspective. And I'm open to someone saying, man, that's BS. This is what the reality is. Um, and I want to hear that kind of feedback.
Yep. We want the Yelp reviews, the Amazon reviews. We want the negative 2 stars if you got them, because we want to
Give
know
it to me.
how
Give
to
it to me.
we want to know how to make things better, right? Because we're
That's
always
right.
open to feedback. All right. Last thing. What do you have for us? Obviously, you just gave us a whole bunch of things, but do you have anything for our community? Any inspirational words?
So, Air Force Wingman Outreach is such an important it's in such an important, really a tool. It is part of the Swiss Army knife that the Air Force needs. And I'm so surprised that we haven't grabbed that and just made that part of the institution. But I'm glad, one, Dre, that you're doing this, because the word has to get out about mental health, and that we can talk about it out loud, that we could talk about it just like I have a sore back or I have a sprained ankle, that we can talk about our mental health, and that there's this spectrum of health, that it's okay that you're within this vulnerability phase, or it's well controlled. And once we get to talk about these things out loud in plain language, I think that we're going to be doing ourselves some real good, and we're going to save some lives, if not even just a life, that we're just saving some time for keeping people from having to grind on issues that are unnecessary. Um, so let's talk about those issues. But I'm going to plug my book a little bit,
Go ahead.
and so I want to say that if we lead with the innate qualities that we have, those strengths that we have, that'll allow us to become more self-aware. That'll allow us to understand people a little bit more, and then we'll be more engaging. So maybe we can catch folks that are not doing so well, who are on the left end of the spectrum. And so let's think about leading in a authentic way, which causes you to be more aware of the people around you, so that you can then catch these kind of things, and then we can talk about these things out loud.
Mm. Well said, Satch. We want this to be common conversation. We do not want people to have to hide from this if
That's
they
right.
don't want to.
Right.
And that is the purpose of this page. We have the privacy, but we also have the support of each other.
Yeah. And if anybody ever, and I mean this, you can wake me up, if you wanted to talk about any particular topic, I'm open to talk about it. Everybody's important, especially the airmen that I'm around. And so, you know, drop me a line. You can find me anywhere on social media. I'm very, very responsive. So holler at me.
All right, now. We want to thank Satch for coming on. Thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for
much.
coming to this
Appreciate it.
platform. I will post the link to the book. I also will post the quote he had. Culture Code
Mhm.
is an awesome book. I need to read that. Extracttheleader.com is where you can find the book. And also, Air Force Women Outreach at gmail.com is the email that you can reach out to us. So please be safe, AFWO, and we will be talking to you soon. We're out.
Thank you.